of 110 Luciani Street. So,
For the record, I'm
Floor is
Attorney
yours.
Robert Uskovich representing Vizzo. Our geotech is on his way. He's an elderly gentleman who doesn't drive, so we had to pick him up. So hopefully he will be here shortly. First of all, per Attorney Kyla's comments, the tarp was replaced with a different color type immediately following the meeting. The fence that's on the property was leaning, so that was fixed. Per your request, we have provided to your staff, who I believe has put it in your packets, a detail on the blasting from the blaster, his procedure, time frame, etc. Our engineer will comment on the Mr. Criscola's comments relative to, Fred, do you want to address those now?
Sure.
actually, Bob, maybe we should have you go through your comments and then have him respond to them. Is that okay?
I would gladly do that. I developed a memorandum dated December 2nd, and the plans that I reviewed are not the latest ones that obviously this is a new revision tonight. I have starred items which have been kind of what my opinion is that have been hanging since last month. And the first one is the letter that was dated, the letter from the Geotech that was dated September 14th, and I've always been questioning if September 2014 or 2015. I believe it's a typo. I think it should be cleared for the record. Second item was my concern over the exposed rock surface that has a gradient of 2 feet, that's greater than 2 feet vertical to 1 foot horizontal. And my concern about how close it is to the back of the house and the patio. My concern goes on to talk about issues about weathered rock subject to freeze-thaw cycles and possibly falling and causing damage to the dwelling or other improvements. We received a letter dated November 11th, 2015, and in my opinion, it still doesn't address the concerns for the safety that I've raised. We need to make sure that when everyone walks away, that when, freeze thaw and fissures in the rocks, and I'm a civil engineer, I'm not a geotechnical engineer, but we need to make sure that what's left there isn't going to cause an issue later by rock falling off. My experience as a civil engineer is that with rock cuts, you have to be very, very careful. You have obviously a blast plan that was submitted. Depending on what happens here, you may get cracks opening up in the rock to allow more water to get in there, and therefore you can imagine what would happen. So 2 for me is a big item that is still up in the air at this point. Item number 3 talks about, I'm recommending that a geotechnical engineer supervise, inspect, and report on the rock cut and the final grading of rock cut slopes. And really that pertains to my concerns that go back to number 2 that I just talked about. So I feel very important that that is a condition of approval or consideration, however this goes, whatever the commission feels makes sense for this application. Item number 4 talks about the swales on the top of the slope, and I'm asking for just a construction methodology. There is some overburden there. I can't tell whether it's 2 feet or 3 feet or less than that, and he's showing rock cuts anywhere from 20 to 25 feet. And I'm just asking to explain to all of us how that's going to be constructed It can be constructed, it needs to be thought out, it needs to be presented, and I think it wants to be on a plan, and it needs to be spelled out, is where I'm going with that one. Item 4 talks about design requirements for riprap surface material that's being proposed for the new swales. Plans that I've seen include, rock that will be riprap, that will be put in the swales, but I haven't seen any calculations that are, anything that has crossed my desk that tells me that the rock size is the right size. And I'm asking for that to be submitted. Item number 5 talks about compliance with section 7.4 of your zoning regulations, particularly grading operations. And A through E talks about, slopes shall be no steeper than 1 to 3. I make a note that a waiver was granted for this section under the previous applications. I haven't seen a request for that at this point. Item 5B is the yellow markers. I believe that they are in place now. I think it needs to be noted on the plan. I'm just making that statement for you. C talks about the access gate. D talks about the 100-foot requirement for having a dustless surface, which was going to be crushed stone, and that is in accordance with your regulations. And I'm noting at the end that a waiver was granted under the last application. I haven't seen a request for this application. 5E talks about the operation, and this is your regulation, says 50 feet from any property line or public road. In summary, you granted a waiver under the last application. Again, I haven't seen a request for one. 6 talks about a recommendation that I always put in my review, and I do this because I think it makes sense to have the design engineer of record or a engineer hired by the owner or developer during construction to certify that the plan that you approve, that the erosion controls are installed in accordance with the design intent of the plan. I haven't seen that note at this point. 7, bonding should be required. There's a lot going on here for improvements. 8 is, I'm saying that a licensed arborist should be employed to examine the trees at the top of the slope. When I've been there, I see some roots, I see some overburden, I see a cut. And my concern is you have a house that's very close to it, and if a tree needs to be taken down a little bit at the time of construction, prior to the construction of the home, I think that person needs to review that to safeguard the future occupants of this home. 9, recommendation of an as-built survey be prepared by a licensed land surveyor certifying compliance with the plan. That note should be part of the record, and it's been my opinion that that note should always be on the project plan so that we can check that off later. 10, notes of blasting plan, which one has been submitted, and I'm just noting that it should be reviewed by the town's fire marshal as the expert. 11, we've talked about 250 feet for pre-blast surveys and 500 feet, and I see conflicting things in the record and the plans, and I believe it needs to be coordinated. It needs to be discussed with this commission prior to moving this one forward. And 12 talks about a recommended narrative be submitted to the commission that clearly delete the details, procedures that will be in place, and the measures that will be implemented to protect public safety in the vicinity of the rock cuts and the site during construction activities, and also once the work gets completed. And 13, I'm asking for the start and completion dates of the proposed excavation and blasting activities be included in the construction sequence and narrative that's published on sheet 2 of the plan set. So at this point, that's where I believe we are with my review.
Does the commission have any clarification questions before we have the applicant answer these questions?
But just so I understand, you have not seen or gone over the plans that were submitted just now?
The last revision that I've seen is 11/27, and these are 12/3.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Okay, thank you.
For the record, Fred D'Amico, I believe I addressed just think 4 comments that were left that I could address. There's some other items that town engineer brought up, like, for instance, an arborist, and I agree with all those items, that there should be an arborist. That should be one of the requirements. There obviously should be bonds. If I was under the impression that the waivers that were granted on the last project were still in effect. It's a weird situation because it's an application that was approved. However, it's past the extension, the timeline. So I'm not sure if this is technically a extension or if it's a whole new application. So if it's being treated as a new application, then yes, the waiver should be, I guess, requested and granted. But basically the same three or four waivers that were in the original plan.
If I may just interject, verbally the last time I asked that the same waivers be granted this time, but do you need the request for waivers in writing?
Are we considering this a new, I thought we were considering this a new application, so I don't, but,
This is a new application. The other one expired and was
Exactly.
gone, so we would need it in writing for the record.
okay, that's what I
In
thought.
writing.
That's what I was.
I did, on the construction narrative, I did add a line, basically, or 1 or 2 lines, saying that the blasting will commence 2 weeks after receipt of approval, and take approximately 3 weeks for the blasting and excavation of that material. There's another, I did go into a little more detail on the riprap swale, show the thickness, the type of, it was modified riprap. It's only taking 2 cubic feet per second, so it's a very small amount of water for the runoff. The 2 swales that are being proposed, what I did is I relocated them prior to this, but they're now going to actually the north and the south of the main cut, and where they go down the slope is in an area where there's all soil. I kept them off of above the rock cut. There is 2.5 to 3 feet of overburden, and then as it goes down the slope, there's soil on those 2 areas. And matter of fact, that's the reason why, as you can see on the left side, we still have to put in one little section of a retaining wall.
Could you put that up?
Yes,
because,
sure.
I'm not sure everyone here is following.
The retaining on the south side, which is,
Fred, why don't you bring that closer so they can see it better?
Fred, why don't you put it next to Terry, so that, well, backlight,
No, this is for the commission.
Okay.
anyways, there's a retaining wall on the south side, which is this area, and that's what I tried to keep the swale around that so it stays in the soiled area. The other, I think there were just 2 other comments that I addressed, that I could address, and all the rest is unfortunately Geotech has to address those items. And I believe, one is the certification. I agree that there should be a requirement for certification for the sediment erosion control, and I put that on the drawing, as well as I believe I put a note that an as-built is required. So there should be, and I agree, there should be an as-built. If the project is approved, there should be an as-built at the end of the project to ensure that the construction was according to the plan. I think I addressed all those items.
Fred, you corrected there was a discrepancy, I believe the engineer brought up between...
Yes, there's one other item. There was a discrepancy with the distance for blasting for the pre-blast survey. I put down 500 on my drawing. The Geotech said it's only necessary for 250, so I changed mine to agree with the 250. However, if the commission sees or if the fire, specifically, if the fire marshal, who will actually oversee the blasting too, if he sees that, if he believes that it should be 500 feet, then by all means, that's what's going, whatever the fire marshal's going to require is what we'll have to abide by. I think that's actually handled by the state regulations also.
Fred, did you do an investigation for any springs on the property?
Yes, I did go up to there was another item that was mentioned. There was, the commission requested that I go up to the properties in the back and see if I could find any spring, and I could find no spring, even after the last rains. There's just an ordinary amount of runoff. It's very, very minor. The site's still dry, and I couldn't find any springs going all the way up to the road above.
And there's no water like coming through that rock?
I couldn't see any water coming through the rock, no.
Really?
I see it in my backyard. I'm 7 houses away.
There could be more drainage problems down the street, 2 or 3 houses away, might even be worse conditions.
Are we talking about the same neighborhood?
I'll come over to my house tomorrow, I'll show you.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, excuse me, this is a public hearing, and only one person can speak at a time, please. I know it's hard, but you have to be recognized by the chair to speak. Thank you.
Again, like I said, I went up directly above the watershed that contributes to this site, and there are no springs there. There's no major amount of runoff coming off. And if you do go off the site further to the south, there are 2 or 3 lots down. There's also rock cuts. They have basically the same conditions, and in those conditions, they might be a little worse as far as runoff. The runoff might be, I believe the runoff, as you can see that the contours are going this direction to the south, so I believe a lot of the runoff is going past this property and hitting all these properties in the south.
I guess I'm kind of curious because initially, the first application, we actually did see pictures of water coming off of that property, and I'm surprised it wouldn't be there now, but the bigger issue is, that Mr. Priscola brings up, is that there's no protection on this cliff when it gets completed, and falling and freezing could be a pretty serious situation.
And I agree with Mr. Priscola that if the project is approved, I think one of the requirements should be a contingency that a geotech is on site, and especially not just during the process, but right after the process is complete, to again check the ledge and ensure that it is still stable. Because, as he says, if once you blast it, it's possible, everybody thinks it's going to be solid, everything's going to be fine, but after you blast it, you may inspect it and find out, geez, I think in this case, we're going to have to do something else to ensure that it's still stable. You may have to pin it, you may have to cut back a little bit to slope it back a little bit if it turns out to be it's loosened up by the blasting. Normally, if you blast it properly, you shouldn't have the problem. But until you blast it, there's no way to tell for sure.
At the last meeting, you also said that you thought the blasting would only be a week, and now suddenly it's 3 weeks. So the same blasting, the same stuff, right?
Yeah, it's the same. It's one small area. I do believe it's probably only going to take 1 week, but I don't want to just say, since I put it on the drawing, I figured, let me put down the 3 weeks to make sure that we have enough time to complete it in. But it's only a couple hundred yards. It's one little small area. The blaster he should be blasting it in 3 or 4 days. It should be done.
And after it gets blasted, what about trucking it out of there and everything?
And again, the material, that's the other reason why I said the 3 weeks includes the time of blasting it and getting the material out.
Yeah.
And 200 yards isn't much, so you're only talking basically 10 truckloads. That could easily be in 1 day. I think there's more material that's in the excavation of the house itself. So the area that's for the ledge that's back there is only 10 truckloads.
And you're telling us that you're telling everybody that this blasting will mean that they won't be doing any more of that
Hammering.
that they've been doing for,
I believe the hammering is actually more intrusive to the neighborhood because it's continuous, it's loud, it vibrates a lot, and it's basically 8 hours straight. Whereas blasting, you drill it, blast it, and it's over. Not to say that blasting is completely, that's also intrusive, but a lot less than the hammering.
all right, I mean, just quickly, by the way, my notes show me that you said you were going to come back with the same waivers put in this application as that last application. That's my notes
Yes.
from last time, so just so we're clear on that.
And in that regard, Fred, what is the steepness going to be, the slope?
Of the ledge,
Afterwards, in comment 5A, our engineer says that he grants you the waiver. The usual routine is no more than 1 to 3. And I just want to be sure that we understand again with the commission what it's going to be after all of these revisions.
I believe there's one area in the front that's, I think, a 2 to 1, but most of the area is, with the ledge, where the ledge cut is, it's actually almost a 1 to 1. But other than that's the steepest area. And then once you get past the ledge, there's one little area, I think to the right, to the northeast of it, that's a 2 to 1. But most of the area is then left untouched. Because of the blasting, we're now, instead of going back further, we're not disturbing the whole back of the property. Before, with the 3 walls, we were actually further back into the property.
Saying it was steeper before than it's going to be now based on the blasting of what you told me?
So the ledge portion will be steep. The ledge portion will be almost a 1-1 slope. Almost a vertical slope, actually. I think the other waiver that you were mentioning was within the 50 feet, because again, we're right up against the property line here, and that's the reason why that waiver, that's kind of goes hand in hand with that.
Did he misaddress in anything, Mr. Criscola?
No, I think everything is fine. The only thing that I wanted to talk about, just to remind the commission to answer Alan's question, the 1 to 3 was vertical to horizontal. And Fred, you ought to just check me. I see you are 3 horizontal to 1 vertical. So you're steeper. It is steep. It's like a 1-to-1 slope. I see 25 feet in 7 feet.
For the ledges?
Yes.
Yes, the ledge is almost a vertical slope, yes.
Okay. So
it is steeper in that one part, but
Yes.
what the suggestion is the blasting, besides the timing and the noise and everything else, but the blasting is what's going to produce that. And we still don't know what the result of that blasting is going to be in terms of the uniformity or correctness of the rock.
Yes.
One of the issues that you brought up
That's
for
a
us.
fair statement.
Until it's complete, there's no guarantee what the stability is until, and I think it should be checked after it's complete. And again, I think that actually is item number 2 and 3 that Mr. Criscola had also, which I agree. Item number 3 kind of takes care of item number 2, if you ensure that a geotech is on site, and after the site's complete, he's also there to certify that the slope is stable.
So if we were to assume that he couldn't certify that slope is stable, let's assume that for the moment.
Then
What kind of actions would be out there that you would have to take in order to make that area stable? Because that appears to be the safety of not only this new homeowner potentially, but of residents around.
there's 2 or 3 things that can be done. You can either cut the slope back at a more of an angle, it would take a little more blasting, but instead of a vertical slope, you'd have to cut it back slightly so that it wouldn't be almost vertical. The other method would be to either put up something like a chain link fence that actually on the surface of the rock to hold the rock in. It's kind of like a gabion that you see in some erosion areas.
Behind Amity Shopping
Slight slopes
I understand.
to protect the rocks from coming down. Or they can be, if there's one area where you can see there's a fissure in the rock, they actually could drill and pin it. That's a little more involved, and I think it would have to take a geotech and a structural engineer to actually inspect it to make sure that it's secure.
So I asked this question, not to be a devil's advocate, but let's assume that there's a number of these ways in which it would not be stable, okay? Wouldn't you be able to ensure stability, say the first example you gave, by virtue of doing a different kind of blast and a different kind of cut? So this way you wouldn't run into that problem? In other words, I don't know why you want to leave a vertical slope there. It's been talked about. I was over there taking a look at it, and it is pretty high. It's pretty steep. And once you go and blast it, it'll be even higher and steeper, it would seem to me, based upon where you put the house. And I'm just wondering why you wouldn't want to, at the get-go, why you would not want to ensure that that area would not have any problems with not only falling rock, but just the stability of the slope.
Well, most areas that, what they normally do is they start out with a vertical slope, such as, I don't know, like in Shelton, Split Rock, different areas like that. You see a large shopping center areas where they go up 40 feet, 50 feet sometimes. But they'll do a vertical slope, or almost a vertical slope. If they have a problem, then they go a little more. Number one, it disturbs more material in more areas, so you try not to do it. And also, it's actually a little more time consuming. So the best way to do it is to try to do as minimum as possible to get in and out, so that it doesn't disturb as much. But until you do it, then the geotech could look at it and he would say, yes, it's the best way to do this is put the chain link fence on it, or do, along the slope to protect it. If there is a loose rock that comes off, it will be caught. But most areas they generally don't cut it back, because most of the time they just go straight up, and like even, I think on Route 8 down in Shelton also, same thing, they cut it at a vertical slope, and then 10 years later, it started sloughing off. Then at that point, I think they did cut it back on an angle.
I know.
And that was one area where there was, but that's probably 40-foot high cut. That's a little bigger. So
And this
it
is
depends on how high.
is the end cut on
This
this?
is 20, let's see,
25 feet.
20 to 25 feet, yes.
Yeah, those may be questions that the geotech
I understand, I'm
address.
just, and I assume they are.
And assuming that, you approve the plans as they are submitted, if we run into those problems, there's no reason that we can't come back, tell you that we ran into these problems, and now we're looking to cut back the slope at a lesser steepness or whatever. You can make that a condition of your approval.
Well, I think we'd like to avoid putting ourselves in a situation where we have to, this is the,
We would like that
these are the
too.
two options, and they both are terrible, but it's because we waited. So I think we need to get as many things crossed off before we...
Yeah, I think the geotech's first report, although very short, and his second, which is a one-line report, where he said the stability would be there basically forever. But where he is, I don't know.
Yeah, and I don't actually know how he says that, because every engineer in here is telling us that they don't really know what's there until it's dug or blasted, so it's pretty good that he can...
And again, it's my understanding that looking at the mappings, et cetera, and samples of the rocks, he determines his opinion,
Again, I'm not a geotech, and again, like,
No, I understand.
so I'm looking for the worst case scenario.
I know.
And I understand him, same thing. It's like, yeah, we expect it, I expect it to be not a problem, but, and I agree with that, if there is a problem, what would the situation be?
And again, one of the reasons we're in here is because everybody thought it was X, and they started doing it, and look what it looks like,
Correct.
and it's Y, so... pretty serious. I mean, Alan, you're supposed to be asking at this point, what happens if the geotech guy's wrong about the...
Well,
Does he put it
This
back?
is not a forced absence from this public hearing, I'm sure. It's just a loss of direction.
And I'm assuming, Terry, that like all the talks about on here about doing pre-checks on the surrounding homes before the blasting, that's all in the procedures with the fire marshal and that permit?
That's my understanding,
Yeah, that wouldn't be us necessarily, or you actually, well, necessarily.
not myself.
Yeah.
I believe that the pre-blast survey, is in the best interest of the plaster,
Yeah.
frankly.
Yeah. I would think so.
I would buy it, I would want to make that.
Ultra hazardous activity, strict liability.
Yes.
But the homeowner doesn't have to let them pre-check, does it?
I don't think so, although I'm not an expert in that.
No. Don't have to.
I would think so. Take your chances, or everybody takes their chances. All right. Other questions from the commission? So we kind of need to hear from the geotech person.
I apologize, I don't know what the story is. I know that when we contacted him, he indicated he did not drive at night. So Mr. Vizzo is picking him up. If you want to let the audience speak, and then when he comes, we can, because he would be better to address the first three items on your list.
Yeah. So I was thinking about, is that okay? We start letting people speak, and then we can,
I think that would be fine as long as you would allow some cross-examination of the geotechnical engineer as well.
from the audience. Yeah. Well, it's either that or take a pause and do something else and come back. I think people would like to give their opinions. So, why don't we do that? We're gonna start take questions, comments from the audience. And, so we'll do it, until the geotech person gets here. And when he does, we'll stop comments from the audience, if that's okay with everyone. And we'll have the geotech person talk. All right. So is there anybody that would like to speak this evening? Sir? I'm sure Chris will remind you that everybody has to sign in up there.
Sign in, sign up.
Such a good job.
Be comfy, kick my feet up. Well, I haven't public spoke for a while, but first thing I want to say, I've been in this town, my name is Randolph Sakicki. I've been in this town for 60 years. As a matter of fact, I've been on Luciani Road for 62 years, okay? Yay me.
You're the town.
I've never been to a hearing like this before, but, the focus seems to be so far on how we're going to do it, how we're going to the detriment of every other person that owns property in this neighborhood and has lived there their whole life, how we're going to ruin their lives without hurting them. Well, you can't ruin my life without hurting me. This has a bigger effect than meets the eye, in my personal opinion, and over the years, this is what I see. First of all, some of this is my opinion, some of this was told to me by friends and lawyers. The town of Woodbridge, just a question for the town of Woodbridge, are you going to insure the liability damages under strict liability and hold a bond that will insure the residents for months and years to come for any damages to our personal property and our health? And when I say health, I even mean immediate health. I have a nerve problem, noises disturb me, they disturb my pets, And I don't know if anybody has young children in the neighborhood. They disturb young children. So who's going to be liable for that? Is it the town of Woodbridge that we're going to come after with our class action lawsuit? The second question would be to the benefactor of this whole deal. Is this owner of this property here, is he going to provide the residents with any type of indemnity insurance that'll, on the structural stability of our 1950s built homes? If my foundation cracks, I've been trying to sell my house for 2 years in a row, and I can't sell my house. It's a perfectly sellable house in move-in condition, but for some strange reason, I can't sell it. I'm going to bring up just a few of the reasons that surround that, what I believe to be the problem. One of them being the reason why we're at this meeting or hearing tonight. A short story. Years ago, this town allowed, they granted someone to run a daycare in my neighborhood. Okay, this is my neighborhood. I'm the senior, I'm the elder of this neighborhood. Okay, now they allowed them to run a daycare for some 20 years, and we put up with it. Okay, so this is how I see what happened. So those people, they made their money, everybody made their money, and they left. They no longer live in this state. Now we have a disgusting monstrosity of a house that used to be my house when I was a baby. On the corner of Robert and Luciani Road used to be a cute little Cape Cod. Now it's a monstrosity. It's unsightly. It's disgusting. It has graffiti on it. It has broken blinds in it. It's an abortion. It shouldn't be there. But that's from an old mistake that Woodbridge allowed to happen. Okay, so we can't go back and correct that now. Okay, but we could correct this one because this hasn't happened yet. That mistake is haunting me till this day from 25 years ago. And that was a mistake of this town, to grant them zoning to run a daycare over there. And the money went in somebody's pocket, and they hightailed it out of Woodbridge. Now, someone needs to guard the town, I believe, from a class action suit from all the owners of their properties, you know. We could turn around and band together and come after you for whatever happens. So I would say you better think about protecting Woodbridge. I grew up in Woodbridge. I went to Amity High School in Woodbridge. I hope I don't die in Woodbridge. I'm trying to leave the area, and all I could say is, you need to do things right. The reason why our whole country is in such a mess is because of concessions and waivers, and you're going to allow this, you're going to allow that. Well, how about drawing a straight line in the sand? The sale of my house has been on the market for 3 or 4 months for 2 years, and I can't sell it. Who's going to pay me the difference? And some of the reasons for that is this inner city look from houses like the daycare house. Guys like this gentleman who wants to put up some rental property so he could rent it out to God knows who. And this is what my neighborhood's becoming. This is the neighborhood I grew up in. This is the neighborhood I played baseball on the street, and everybody knew everybody. Those were the days. Well, these aren't those same days, but in this country, if we don't start doing what's right instead of what's profitable, we're all going to be in a hole. That's how I see this whole situation. So to whomever is the decision maker here, gentlemen and ladies, whoever's involved, consider that things like this ruin people's lives. They change. It's changed my destiny already. I was planning on being out of here 2 years ago. I'm still stuck here. And these are some of the reasons why I'm stuck here, because of profiteering from things of this nature. You know it's a mess. You could see it's a mess. You see all the problems. That's all they talked about were problems, 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 problems. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, if I can interject, and this is somewhat embarrassing, I just called my client. He's sitting home. And I said, I thought you were picking up the Geotech. He says, the hearing's tomorrow night. I said, no, the hearing's tonight. So I don't have it coming, so I'm going to have to request a continuance. Because the Geotech is important for your consideration and your engineer. And I apologize for the misunderstanding.
These are the people who you want to entrust with blasting.
Finally, if we are going to let the audience speak, I did make a request the last time council made certain allegations about improprieties.
I'm ready to talk, sir.
Between the commission and my client with some kind of emails, improper emails, and I'd just like some factual basis for his allegations.
We can do that downtown in the courthouse. Can I speak?
No. Kristen. So if we're continuing,
They have to give us an extension of time.
right, I understand that. If we're doing that, do we still have, can I still have people speak, or do I have to stop and?
No, you can certainly
Oh,
say
I can
that.
still do that. Okay, fine. All right, so,
It's all, as long as it's all contained within the record.
all right.
What you want to do is make sure that everything that needs to be in the record, whether it's public comment, whether it's expert comment, is contained within the record.
Okay.
So,
So even if the geotech person's here, these people can, everyone can speak?
Everybody can speak.
And assuming the geotech person will be here at the next meeting,
they
they can
speak
then
again.
hear the geotech person and respond.
The only thing I would recommend to people is if you're making a comment and you're concurring with a comment that's been made by somebody else, you can come up and say your name and sign in and everything, and just in the interests of us getting home sooner than midnight or whatever, you can just say, I concur with whoever's comments were there before. But certainly you're all welcome to speak because this is a public hearing and that's the point of having it.
All right.
Again, I apologize.
All right. So you're asking for an extension, we have to vote on the extension, or we just?
No, he gives it in writing.
That's what I thought. All right. All right, so we can continue, if people would like to speak from the audience. Ma'am? I was blank. He was
I don't
blank.
know how we can continue because we don't know what the geotech is going to say. After the geotech talks, we might want further comments.
You will.
Speak again.
You will be able to. That's what I was clarifying.
Did you have somebody go to his house and ask him to please come to me?
Excuse me?
Is it possible to have somebody go to his house and pick him up and have him?
He lives in Trumbull, my client's in Oxford by the time, and he did confirm with him today, he told me on the phone, that he's prepared to come tomorrow night. Now, I know we're not gonna continue it till tomorrow.
So you're expecting us to be here tomorrow, all of us, right?
No.
But this is another concession you're making. You don't understand.
What I was possibly gonna suggest.
Well, there is a due process. I mean, we can't just turn around and say, okay, forget it, we're not going to take the application anymore. So it's not really like, we just can't do that. It's not the way it works. Someone asks for an extension, you have to give an extension. If there's a reason not to, you have to have a reason not to, but.
I mean, perhaps the audience wants to hold their comments until after the geotech, but that would be up to them.
Let somebody else speak.
We're not an audience.
Yeah, we're residents.
Let us talk.
No, I'm assuming everyone's going to talk.
You talked about the.
I'm sorry, you need to come up, everybody needs to come up here. Excuse me, everybody needs to come up here, and you also need to sign in, please. Thank you.